Well, we have a new segment that we do once a season coming up now. So with the season wrap up, so we just are going to kind of look back at the season holistically. This is our final episode of the season proper. We may do a couple specials on movies or something over the summer, but this is our last current events focused episode for the season. So the first thing that we like to do is revisiting the predictions that we made at the very beginning of a season in our first episode. We talked in the second episode about whether we were right or wrong about the starting 11 in the first match of the season. And I think we did overall pretty well. I think you beat me a little bit on that. But so now if we look at the other categories that take a whole season to determine, let's start from the top. When considering who the leading scorer would be, you and I each picked Victor Gyökeres, who ended up being our top scorer across competitions.
Yeah, I mean, probably not quite in the way everyone expected. I think it's interesting. We talked about this at the start of the year. Obviously, he scored 50 goals last year with Sporting, but nobody I think is expecting 50 goals. But I do think as he comes in and I think we said like 25 if he gets half that. I mean, he hit 21 across all competitions, probably playing a lot more minutes.
Right.
We talked about with Havertz starting, probably playing a lot more minutes than I think anyone really expected. And look, it took him some time to grow in. Obviously, he has some technical shortcomings as a player. I don't want to sit here and talk about wax poetic about how amazing he was, but let's not undersell some of his abilities. I mean, those 14 goals. I mean, we brought him in to score goals against the bottom half of the table, and he did that with some aplomb. 5 Champions League goals, not a bad return overall, and more importantly, a Premier League trophy. So,
well, yeah, and I think ultimately he did what we talked about needing last season, maybe the season before, where it's not necessarily that he's running up the score in matches, but it's that he makes those goals that make it a 1-0 victory instead of a scoreless draw. Like just those key goals spread throughout the season that add up to points on the table and result in a championship. And I think that's what we ended up seeing from him.
I do think also he probably gets a closer run in this if Havertz plays the whole season, if Saka plays the whole season, if Odegaard plays the whole season, and maybe not Odegaard in terms of scoring goals, but think about how much of his number is maybe not inflated, but definitely kind of the 21 goals is well ahead of that. The second place, Saka finished in second. Well, he and Martinelli tied for second with 11.
Right.
Like we were the second leading score, the highest scoring team in the Premier League. Like we scored goals, but we can score more. Like like there's a level to this offense that we just weren't able to get to, and injuries played a big part in that. And so,
right.
I think it's easy to say he doesn't have the same kind of competition in terms of leading goal scorer, but also if that offense is clicking, how many more goals does he get if he and Odegaard work on that connection? If he and Saka work on that connection, Havertz,
yeah. Yeah, that's something that we've talked about also, like with Eza in particular, who was not signed before the season started. He came in a few matches in. You hope that over summer training, and who knows with World Cup what their summer training schedule is going to really be like. It's, I'm sure, abbreviated. But getting those practices in where they get to really work on those types of things, like finding him, because there are so many goals that he could have gotten if only he were a step ahead or a step behind of where he actually was, or the pass was made when he was a step ahead or behind. Not really blaming him. It's really the person attempting the assist. But hopefully we can both pick him at the beginning of next season, and it'll be a more interesting story talking about it at the end.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the summer plays out. I think a full training camp with everybody will help. Even he was a late arrival because that signing didn't come until later in the summer.
Right.
So we'll see as well. Obviously, I think there's certainly some changes to come to the lineup as well. But people out there talking about this being a bust. I don't think it was. I think this is a solid signing. I think, I paid a lot for him. First, going right for a striker these days, nah, we honestly didn't. That's just how you want a striker, you got to pony up, and so
right, yeah. All right, so the next thing that we predicted is player of the year, player of the season. So I see these haven't really aged very well given how the season turned out. You predicted Saka. I predicted Ethan Nwaneri, who got transferred on loan away from the club for like the second half of the season. So.
Yeah. And a fairly disastrous loan spell. He was there as a favorite of Roberto De Zerbi, who was the manager at Marseille at the time, and then he left Marseille shortly after Nwaneri arrived, and now manages Spurs. So, it was a rough year for Ethan, but hopefully the experience continues to toughen him up, and he finds a place in the lineup, or ultimately, maybe he's a player who gets sold to fund another transfer. I don't know.
Right.
Saka, I think it's still injuries.
Of course.
He's not really going to get any rest because, of course, he's going with England to the World Cup. So we'll see how that plays out. But
Yeah, so what we usually do is, so as any new listener, viewer can tell from this episode, we always pick a player of the week, and that is something we do every single week when Arsenal has played. And what's fun to do in this season wrap-up is I total up who we picked however many times over the course of a season, and we end up with our statistical player of the season. Week by week, who do we pick the most over the course of a season? And it's always fun for you to guess, since I'm the one who does the tallying, I can't guess. But if you were to guess, first guess who... You can guess who I picked the most if you'd like, but you can guess each of us individually and then the total. And bear in mind, the total, I will say right now, we had one guest host. My father, Israel Frankel, no relation, guest hosted on one episode. You were just not able to make that week. He picked Saka. So that one vote for Saka is going to get thrown into the total that is not represented in yours or my tallies.
Okay.
But so if you had to guess for those, what are you thinking?
Ooh, so for you...
And I will say it is close. Like, these are very fine margins.
So quickly. Oh, for myself, I'm going to put out a guess and say that I said Declan Rice the most often.
Okay.
Well, was that it?
I'll make your guesses and I'll tell you how you did.
Okay, so I'm going to say I picked Rice. For you, I'm going to say you picked, because you were kind of all over the place, I'm going to say you picked Timber the most. I don't know why. I just kind of feel that. And I'm going to say Joint. Joint was Rice between the two of us.
So, yeah, that's a good guess. And so for you, you had one winner by one vote, and actually it worked out symmetrically for me. So we each had one with 5, and then 2 with 4, and then 3, and you had another 3. So yours with 5 votes was actually Gabriel, and this includes who we picked for today. So So your choice of Gabriel pushed him over the edge. My pick today of Raya pushed him over the edge. Otherwise, they would have all been tied with 4. So you're with 4, you had Rice and Saka. For me, I had Raya 5 times, and tied with 4 votes each were Eza and Madueke. Actually, I picked Madueke a lot more than I thought I did.
I knew you picked him a fair amount. I didn't think it went all the way to the top like that, but yeah, I get it. Yeah.
So looking at our totals, it's actually a tie in first place and a 4-way tie in second place. So for first place, tied Eza and Raya with 7 each across both of our selections. So that's interesting. Yeah. I wouldn't have thought Eza, because he wasn't he was top 2 for me, but then he was like 3rd choice for you. So
he was a bit of a boomer bust player. Like, he had some games where he was outstanding and obviously the player, and then games where he wasn't, he wasn't.
Right, exactly. So in second place, Gabriel and Victor Gyökeres each had 6, and actually Rice and Saka also tied with them for 6. So it was a big tie at second place, including Rice. So you were close. You were definitely in the right neighborhood. So. So that was our statistical player of the season, based on week by week, who did we vote as the player of the week the most number of times. But let's talk now about our kind of vibe player of the season, based on how we feel about the season now, right? Looking back, who stands out to you the most over the course of this long, long season?
Yes, 60-some games. That was a lot of games. I kind of said this a couple weeks ago, and I've seen nothing to change my mind. It's David Raya, third consecutive Golden Glove. I don't think he quite gets the respect he deserves across the league. Partly as a keeper thing. There's a comment like no keeper's been named Footballer of the Year in since the 70s or something weird. It's not quite. That's not quite right. But something weird like that. Like keepers are treated as a different set of player. Which is kind of unfair, I think. And in this case, I think based on Arsenal and the way our season played out, he does so much in the back. Obviously, our defensive record was a big part of why we finished as champions, why we got deep in every competition. And to me, he's such an important part of that. Played the entire season, produced a number of. He's not going to rack up the saves, but just the number of truly important ones, that critical moments, and some really excellent ones, headlined by the save against Brighton. There right after Christmas. Just some truly excellent saves at critical moments. For me, the player this season is David Raya.
Yeah, this is one, won't be a surprise after you've seen my statistical player of the season. But yeah, no, I fully agree with you. David Raya for me too. He's earned it over the past few years. I think we really have a sense now of his level. And, it was funny just reading some of the wrap up articles talking about the Premier League season once we won and became Premier League champions. It makes me smile when I say that. But reading those articles, talking about when he came in and talking about the 5-phase plan and how Arteta had the full support when he wanted to replace Ramsdale. It wasn't that there was anything wrong with Ramsdale. He just didn't do things the way that Arteta wanted to. Raya came in under kind of weird circumstances. It was a surprise to everybody. But I think looking back at it now, it was brilliant. It was one of the best things that he could have done. And there's a book, I think it was written by Ed Catmull, talking about Pixar and the story of Pixar. And the one of the themes that they addressed early on in Pixar is that success hides problems. When things are going well, it's very easy to miss the things that are broken and just take for granted that everything you're doing is great, and you can miss the things that still need to be improved. And I think Ramsdale was fine, and it could have led other clubs to just keep him because he's good. There's nothing wrong with him. He's doing great. But the vision to be able to see that, no, this is what I need to basically command the whole defense the way that he does. He's on another level. It's something that you really see. And not to pick on Kepa. I don't hate Kepa. I think he got 1 vote from each, or no, 2 votes from me and none from you. For player of the season, or player of the week. He was my player of the week on 2 different occasions, which is remarkable for a backup keeper. But still, you saw in the League Cup final, how big a difference that can make.
Yeah. And he does a lot too. It's not just we talk about the command of the box, marshalling the defense, but also his clearances, is playing out. And I care about that's where we missed him. I know a lot of people focus on missing the cross and it going through his hands, and I get that, but honestly, it was the drop in the distribution ability. That's one of the things that Raya does particularly well that Kepa just doesn't quite have the same way. Yeah. And that's part of what cost us in that game. Oh, absolutely.
And this is something we were talking about at the local Kingston Stockade match that we went to yesterday. I was talking to my wife about this, how the other team was just playing Route 1 football. The keeper gets the ball, he just boots it up the field. Half the time, or even more than half the time, the other team ends up getting the ball, which is good for us because it was the other keeper doing this. And that's just the way things were done for a long time. And when he was trying to pass it to a player, it went over the touchline most of the time and just went out of play. And that's what you see with keepers who are not good at distribution. They're almost a non-entity when it comes to build-up play. But with someone like Raya, he has pinpoint precision, whether he's rolling it, hurling it, or punting it way up the field almost every time. Obviously, he's human, and he had one particularly bad giveaway in the Champions League final yesterday where he just kind of switched off for a moment and put the ball under pressure that it didn't need to be. But almost every time, he puts it exactly where it needs to be, and he begins an attack from the back line, which is what you want him to be doing. So absolutely an essential player of the club.
It's one letter and a space, man. Such a big difference there.
Yeah. So we're unanimous with that. So circling back to the rest of our predictions before we move on to a couple other categories that we're going to talk about. The next thing that we picked is who was going to get relegated from the Premier League this season. So you had a kind of unordered list. You had said in no particular order, Sunderland, Burnley, and Wolves were going to get relegated. And those were all three who were promoted this season, right?
No, Wolves have been up for a few years. They had
right, they had been.
They had been teasing the drop for some time, but yeah,
that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah,
but yeah, Wolves. Burnley, I felt pretty good about as a pick. Sunderland, I didn't feel good making the pick, mostly because old Frank Granit Xhaka. And I actually do know one or two Sunderland fans as well, but so nice to see them. I'm glad I was wrong about that one, but Burnley. Burnley, I wasn't terribly surprised at. Wolves, I wasn't terribly surprised at. They righted the ship a little bit in the second half. They weren't like the worst team the Premier League has ever seen, but however, we should point out I threw in an honorable mention there for Brentford to go down, and that was very wrong. So, as usual, the moral of the story, I know nothing.
Yeah. So it's funny with Wolves for me, they've been, now that you point out, they've been in the Premier League all three prior seasons that I'd watched. So like, they're kind of like part of the firmament. Like they are a mainstay. And like, we will talk about very shortly West Ham. It's like, they're just a Premier League club. That's what they are. Like you have a longer view where you remember a time when Wolves wasn't in the Premier League, but not for me.
Well, it's less so much even that. It's and then you kind of see this with West Ham, like with Wolves. They're just they have been on the skin of their teeth. They have been hemorrhaging players for years. That was a club that was just heading very much in the wrong direction, and that was one. I don't want to sit here and say I saw it coming from a while away, but boy, they felt pretty.
I do feel like you picked them last season too. I think.
Yeah. That one I felt like had been coming for some time. West Ham was a bit of a surprise, but the more that you look at them, in retrospect, it is less surprising. Right. And I'm not surprised at all that Leeds stayed up.
Yeah, so going to my predictions, I basically predicted the 3 up, 3 down, Leeds, Burnley, and Sunderland. I will say I did place them as far as 18th, 19th, and 20th, and I placed Burnley correctly at 19th. So I guess I get 1 out of 3 credit for that at least. So we ended up with West Ham, Burnley, and Wolves going down. Wow. I mean, the fact that West Ham or Tottenham was going down is just crazy, that we're down to 5 London clubs left in the Premier League for the next season. It's kind of crazy.
6 if you count Brentford. Depends how you count Brentford.
Okay.
They're kind of sort of London.
I think of it as 6 London clubs. Yeah, I guess I don't count Brentford, and I don't really know. So, yeah.
Not everyone does. It's they're kind of on the fence on that one, but
So the last thing that we predicted was who our top 4 would be. You and I were unanimous in selecting Arsenal as the champions.
Wait,
we were right this time.
Say it one more time.
We are champions. We are Premier League champions. That's again.
Right. Champions of England. We know who we are. There we go. They come to 4-pack. I gotta drink these at some point.
That was positioned nice and close to your mic, so we had the nice audio cue of the champagne bottle being popped open. So moving to the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th spots, you predicted that Liverpool and City would basically stay where they were relative to each other at the top of the table. Liverpool going down from 1 to 2, and City going down, or staying in 3 actually, while Arsenal moved up. Was Chelsea at number 4. I felt similarly, except City at the top, then Liverpool, and then Chelsea in 2, 3, and 4. And it turns out, I guess, City in number 2 I got right, and that was it for the rest of our predictions as far as those go. We ended up with Manchester United in number 3 and Aston Villa in number 4. So go figure.
Yeah, I mean, Chelsea they're all kind of surprising in their own way. In the end, I think the biggest thing that City was able to do was the additions of Semenyo and Guehi in December. If you look at where they were coming into the January window, 3rd was absolutely on the table. Or if it wasn't, it was because Liverpool, I mean, we talked about them earlier in the show. That was a much bigger fall off than I expected. I thought we talked all year, right? I thought they overperformed a little bit last year. I was not shocked at all they took a step back. That was a bigger step back than I think anyone expected. City, it's a little harder to say. I don't know. Is this a City team that in another year, I don't want. Actually, I don't want to get too much into the other year stuff. I think they definitely solidified themselves in second with the January additions. And then, honestly, of all of those, the biggest shocker is Chelsea. Just what the heck, man? Freaking finished 10th.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this to make fun. I'm genuinely like, how? Like, how did that all? I mean, I kind of know how it all went bad, but man, that all went wrong.
It was useful though. Yesterday we were I was explaining to my wife and son about Champions League qualification because my son especially was not particularly clear on this, and I was able to use them as an example of someone who was in the Champions League this season, and because of where they finished in the Premier League, winning the Champions League was their only way to stay in, and they screwed up both of those. So
yeah, wow, man. In terms of United and Villa. United was, I think, had to be better. I'm all over the map on what I think about United. There's definitely some talent on that roster. They definitely have some talented players. I really don't know what to make of Michael Carrick as their manager. It's hard to say because they got knocked out of they played the minimum number of games possible because they didn't qualify for Europe. Right. And they were knocked out of the first hurdle in both the League Cup and the FA Cup. So they played 40 games this year.
Right.
We played
that makes 60, it easier to reach third.
We played 65.
Yeah.
And so in the second half, they went through long stretches or a game once a week. If there's a club that's going to have the depth to sort of handle that, it's going to be Manchester United. If they make some decent purchases in the summer, I'd be shocked if they weren't in the top 4. I think they were ticketed for Europe all season. It would have been a massive embarrassment had they not made it to Europe. And I think even when they fired Amorim, weren't they like 5th or something? Like they were. Obviously, their fans were frustrated, but they were never truly abject. They were never Spurs. They were never Wolves. They were never truly abject like that. And I think they kind of rose to the top out of the remainder of the bunch. They played well in the second half, but, at Aston Villa, fair play to them. Congrats on winning the Europa League as well.
Right.
Yeah, I think they kind of rose to the top. Spurs and Chelsea, of course, being kind of disasters. Then you get into the mix, and all due respect to the Bees, Brighton, Brentford, Bournemouth. I mean, Villa, I think, is a class above them in general. And so it'll be interesting to see if they have the financial resources, because they ran into this a couple of years ago or 2 years ago, they got into the Champions League. They made it to the round of 16, but then they, kind of fell off in the league. So I still wonder if they have quite the resources and the squad depth to challenge on all fronts again. But, fair play to them for finishing in 4th. And with Liverpool, especially down at 5th. Be interesting to see how that all plays out.
It was funny you mentioned United, and I was just thinking of the rivalry between Arsenal and United, and it was funny. Did you notice the moment they didn't show it live? I don't think, but later on they showed the reaction in the booth to, I think it was to Kai Havertz's goal. And you see Thierry Henry going nuts, and you see David Beckham sitting there, and he's just like like nothing had happened. Like he really doesn't care that Arsenal scored the opening goal that quickly.
Yeah, we enjoyed playing Who Is That in the crowd. Obviously, Thierry Henry got a hand every time. We couldn't hear a thing he was saying, but we know it's about how much he loved Arsenal, how good Arsenal were playing today. And then of course Arsene Wenger got a big cheer a couple times. He was on the screen. We enjoyed the heck out of that. Apparently, Luis Figo was sitting next to him, which was kind of interesting. Anyway, totally.
I saw Beckham was interviewing Mick Jagger pre-match. I think.
I thought that's who that was. I couldn't see clearly.
Every year, it gets harder and harder to identify him. The life.
Ultimately, it could only be at that point. And who else could it be? Anyway.
So the next thing that in the past we've done as a prediction, and I think we decided it's a weird thing to predict at the beginning of the season, but it's still fun to talk about at the end of a season, which is whose stock has fallen and whose has risen over the course of the season. So for you, whose stock has fallen? Who do we look at as being a worse player now than we did before kickoff of the opening match of the season?
Maybe I'm just a little late to the party on this for some people, but for me, I think the most disappointing season, and I think the one that really calls into question his long-term place at Arsenal, is Gabriel Martinelli. I I think at this stage, especially with him and Trossard, right? I think we all agree the left wing of the attack is probably the biggest weak spot on the club as it stands right now. And to me, like at this stage, I'd kind of been hoping that Martinelli would have really seized that position. And the fact is, he hasn't. Trossard was the better player this season.
Even factoring in the Champions League, is that what you're about to say? Even factoring in Martinelli's Champions League phase performance?
Yeah, I mean, dropped in those 6 goals, yeah, but I mean, push comes to shove. And look, I think Martinelli is still a little bit more defensively responsible, but I mean, Trossard was still pretty good on that end too.
Mm-hmm.
With Martinelli, you just need more end product. And who knows, maybe he gets the offseason. He is going to the World Cup with Brazil. Maybe he gets the offseason, gets the some confidence from that. Maybe he comes back firing. Development isn't linear. A step back this season maybe leads to a step forward next season. But unless he's able to find more of that final product, it would. We're not going to talk about guys leaving necessarily at this point, but he's a guy who, if you get an offer for him, I don't know that you can say no. If you get a good offer for him, I don't know that you can say no. So it's disappointing because we had high hopes for him coming in. Think about where we were a couple of years ago. We had some high hopes for him, but for me, he's kind of fallen off a little bit, unfortunately.
Yeah, and so it's a little tough for me just not having the longer perspective on this stuff, and who knows, I'm probably way late. This may have even been a better pick for last year than for this year, but I think going into the season, I had hoped with him regaining health that we would have seen more from this player, but ultimately we didn't as much as I would have liked. I'm going to say Gabriel Jesus, actually. So we're each picking 2 different Gabbies. But yeah, ultimately, he's been disappointing when he's had to come in. He hasn't produced the results as much of a time as Kai Havertz or Victor Gyökeres has in that central forward position. So it's disappointing. It's too bad. And who knows, like we've talked about in previous episodes, who knows what physical state he's in and the mental state caused by his physical state. I'm sure there's reasons for it, but he's not the player that I remember being excited about a few years ago. And we really needed him this season with Kai Havertz being injured so much. We could have really used him as another option up front to help get those extra goals. And he just wasn't really much of a factor.
Yeah, I mean, remember, of course, he was dealing with. He didn't even play till December because of the ACL from last year. He's a tough one. I was a big fan of him when he came, but I think injuries kind of sapped him. I think that's a guy who he isn't able to be that guy because he just isn't able to be that guy anymore, and I think it's a shame. I think he's a guy we talk about Martinelli possibly leaving. I think Jesus has played his last game for Arsenal. It was very nice that he got the goal against Palace in the final game. A nice little send off on that regard.
Yeah. All right. So the opposite of this category, Stock Risen, who is a much better player in your estimation now than at the beginning of the season.
So I'm going to make it a clean sweep of Gabbies. I'm going to say Gabriel Magalhaes. I mean, we've always been high on him. Obviously, we've thought very well of him, but to think about the way where he's come from, it to sort of turn in kind of like not just a well-rounded center defender or a guy you can put in on a team sheet to being arguably the best center back in the Premier League. I think he is absolutely, and in terms of his all-around play, I mean, he only scored 3 goals in the Premier League this year, and of course, all coming off corners. Not coming off corners. The Newcastle one wasn't, but all
right.
But he's sort of he's developed that kind of overall game from the defensive position that he's sort of taken it to another level, and obviously, and Saliba next to him has been great. And we could point to guys like Hincapié and Mosquera who came in and put in good shifts for their age and experience. But for me, the player I think is in the sense that Gabriel's kind of elevated himself into that conversation as best at his position in the world. For me, I think this is as good as it gets. He's going to the World Cup this summer. He and Marquinhos, the center back for PSG, who after he missed the penalty, Marquinhos came over and gave him a hug, had some words to say in his ears. And, for the 2 guys who are going to be at the center of Brazil, I I don't think this Brazil side is certainly not a vintage Brazil. I don't think they're among the favorites. But if those two are clicking in the center back position, Brazil could really make a run. So,
Yeah.
So hats off to Gabby, to Big Gabby.
Yeah. Yeah. My pick may be facile, maybe obvious, but it's the first thing that I thought of, and it's hard to disagree with, I think. Max Dowman. We went from never hearing of him before to all of a sudden he's scoring for us. He's starting for us, and it's all anyone can talk about is Max Dowman. I think that's someone to watch next season for sure.
He's an interesting one. Obviously, his talent, 16 years old, just kind of wild. Obviously, the goal against Everton, the man of the match performance coming off the bench. He got the start against Palace, played in the Champions League. I will say, though, if you want to think cautionary tale on him, we were saying these exact same things a year ago about Ethan Nwaneri and Miles Lewis-Skelly. Excuse me there. Not that he's going to follow that route. Obviously, they're all different people in different circumstances, different players, positions, all of that. But he was definitely a name to watch in the early days, even in the summer tour. But to just sort of follow that up with, to step into the Premier League the way he did, especially his age, obviously very impressive. So
yeah, and I think with regards to what's happened with MLS and Ethan Nwaneri, I mean, Ethan Nwaneri didn't play. I don't know why. Like, we didn't really see him. It's not to say that he isn't as good now as he was. We just kind of reinforced our lineup to where we didn't need to be choosing such a junior player in that role. Miles Lewis-Skelly, similarly, like once he did get the chance, he did, like we talked about in the final, like he did kind of earn his way back into the squad. So I think the season could have easily turned out differently for Lewis-Skelly had he maybe been given the chance, and they didn't. So.
And it's so interesting too the way you sort of run through that. There's so much we don't see about like what goes on in training behind the scenes, especially in the case of because Arteta's talked about how good Lewis-Skelly was. Is the unspoken bit there that Nwaneri maybe wasn't as good as they were hoping for, or at the level he needed to be, and maybe he needed to be in a position where he played every day, which is why they loaned him out to Marseille. How much of it is position of need too, right? Like Nwaneri's playing positions that, like, does he play on the left side, sort of the left wing or right wing position? Well, we have Saka, and behind him Noni Madueke. That's why we signed him. Trying to work through some of our central midfielders. For weeks, I remember it was Rice and Zubimendi, and like, okay, well, you're gonna stick Nwaneri into that. So I think there's a lot. I mean, Mikel Merino got hurt right at the end of the transfer window after Nwaneri was loaned out. So how much is that different if he's here when Merino if those events are reversed? If Merino gets hurt, does he get loaned out?
Right.
So I think he's a little bit of bad luck in that one too. But again, I think in all these cases, right? I mean, Lewis-Skelly's 19, Nwaneri's 19, Dowman's 16. Like, their careers are in front of them. So Max Dowman certainly was this year's new hot thing, and good for him.
Yeah. All right. So now let's take a look back at the whole season and tell me, what is your moment of the Premier League this season?
My Premier League moment of the season, a lot of great ones. Obviously, we won the league, and that was awesome. The downside, of course, was the way we won the league, of course, was by City dropping points in another game. And it would be easy to sort of pick Havertz against Burnley as sort of the winning goal, the title win goal. But I'm actually going to go with Trossard's winner against West Ham the week before. Because I think that was kind of, I think that game was kind of one of those where we could have dropped points. We could have let City, it felt like we could have let City back into the race. Because that game was going late at level, and Trossard, I mean, I've been part of some eruptions at the pub, and we've had some big moments. I'm thinking Reece Nelson against Bournemouth, even Max Dowman earlier this season. But the reaction to that Trossard goal, not only with the group, but you can see it in Trossard. Look at that. Watch that goal again. Go find that goal. Watch his celebration. The look on his face. I mean, it's terrifying, actually. But like they're like that. that to me was kind of the moment. And obviously, of course, there's the whole VAR and the foul on Raya, all that comes a little bit later. But I think that goal, that was where I think we actually like really won the league. I know officially, technically, et cetera, but I think that goal was it. And so, as a moment in the league, I'm going to pick Trossard's goal.
Yeah, it makes sense. This was tough for me to think of. Just kind of, I don't think of things that way. Like I don't keep in my head like a list of moments. Like it was easier last season. Like those free kicks from Declan Rice were just transcendent, right? It's like a very easy thing to pinpoint. It's just a feat of athleticism and unprecedented in his career. It was mind blowing. That was easy. This season is hard. There aren't like astounding moments like that stood out to me. So looking back through some of the things that characterized the season, some of the events that happened earlier, there's one player who scored a bunch of goals for us who we haven't talked about in a while. His name is Owen Goal. He made his debut for us in the December match against Wolves with a brace to win that match against Wolves. And then he went on to score again in the League Cup quarterfinal against Crystal Palace and a regular Premier League match against Brighton, and then an FA Cup third round match against Portsmouth. Where did Owen go?
A free transfer, man. Got him on a free. That's. One of the enduring subplots of this season was how much it seemed like Arsenal winning seemed to annoy other people. And I think own goals prevalence. I mean, it is a fair amount of them. Right. It's actually quite a few, but I think there were ultimately 7 across all competitions.
Right. It's so funny. Like in prior seasons, we'd see maybe 1 or 2 the whole season, but then they were clustered, like they're around the same time of the year. So I'm picking that brace of own goals against Wolves in December. That was his debut for us this season, and it was fun.
I do think we should also throw in though, in the case of the Wolves one, I think both of those, I think we score either way. I think Saka picks up the Olympico if he does, or Jesus is there to put in the cross. So.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's funny. It's funny that, own goals. I mean, I guess that kind of question of the moment of the season. Like, what's the thing that's when you think back to this season? Obviously, the trophy lift is obviously the correct, correct answer. But
aside from that,
but we had 2 great campaigns this year, right? We did the league, but we also had the Champions League. I'll let you start on this one. What was your moment of the Champions League campaign?
So this was also similarly tough. I mean, the Champions League this season, we won virtually every game. I mean, like our draws came in like first or second legs of a 2-leg round where, the end result was still that we won the complete fixture. And it's tough. Like there weren't those same big goals like we were just talking about with Real Madrid last season. I mean, for me, it may be a recency bias, but I think the biggest reaction I had to any moment this season was Kai Havertz scoring early in the final yesterday. It was just out of nowhere. It was a shock. I'd been having dreams the night before about telling my family watching this match, like, we need to score early. This is what we need to do to win this. That's always led to good results for us. And we're watching, and like I mentioned earlier in the episode, like I didn't even notice it had happened at first. I was taking notes and I missed it. It came out of nowhere. It was like a bizarre turnover that he capitalized on beautifully. It looked like it hit side netting or something. Like it didn't even look like it could have been a goal, and it was. And it was a delayed reaction for me. But I was like, oh my God, we scored early. This is it. This is our moment. And it didn't end up working out. But I think that was a great all-time moment in the Champions League for us.
I mean, obviously it's a totally different goal. This was, this is obviously roofed on a counter, whereas the one I'm thinking of, shout out to the 06 yellow there, Sol Campbell's header off a free kick against Barcelona. The same kind of thing, right? That kind of magical, and you scored in the Champions League final is just your club scored both cases were ahead, which of course means we lost the game from ahead both times. But keeping it positive now, keeping it positive. Yeah, right. There was something special about scoring a goal in a Champions League final, and Havertz is pretty good at it. And more importantly, Arsenal has, we've got that, and I'll take that extra step. For
Yeah.
me, I'm looking at the Champions League. I'm actually going to go back. I almost wanted to pick the second leg against Atletico Madrid, but for me, the moment in the Champions League, the moment when I really felt like we were as good as we hoped we'd be, I'm going to go all the way back to the day before Thanksgiving. Arsenal 3, Bayern Munich 1. I'm picking this one. Obviously, we talked a little bit about Bayern as a boogeyman for us in the Champions League. And honestly, this was a game I remember going into and looking at it, just because of some injuries at particular moments, and the lineup we were rolling out wasn't quite where I want it to be. I mean, Madueke scored in this game, which means he was playing,
Right.
as opposed to Saka. So we were
Right.
had some parts that weren't quite where we'd want them to be, and we kind of rope-a-doped a little bit in the first half, a little bit like, not quite the PSG game, but definitely a back and forth you'd expect between two of the best teams in Europe. And then in the second half, we found another gear altogether and just ran what is arguably the third best team in Europe. We ran them off the field. And it's one of those, again, I don't live online, but I'm aware of these sort of ongoing conversations. It was amazing how many times people just forgot. Oh, yeah, I think if Arsenal, if they make it to the final, Bayern will take them apart. I'm sorry, no. We took Bayern apart already this year. And it was just an amazing it was an amazing game. Especially given what I would argue is a bit of a slightly weaker state for us, as sort of a statement about just how good this team really was to take what ended up being one of I think the highest scoring team in their history, and we thumped them. And so, to me, like, sort of say where this club is currently, beating Bayern in the even though it was in the league phase, beating Bayern in the group stage. PSG was the best team in Europe. That's partly why they won yesterday. But if we had played Bayern in the final, we'd have hammered them. But
right,
c'est la vie, if I may borrow a language.
Yeah, so no, good picks, and overall a good season. It's like
no. Overall, great season.
Okay,
let's not
undersell
this. We won the league for the first time in 22 years.
Yes.
Quarterfinals of the FA Cup, final of the Carabao Cup, final of the Champions League. Like, don't let anyone tell you that was easy. That was really hard. and to come away and to come as close as we did. I mean, in a different world, we're celebrating a treble, right? With the frankly, look who knocked us out of the FA Cup with Southampton. Well, as we discovered, Southampton was doing a little bit of behind the scenes work there. I don't know. I mean, but again, don't let anybody tell how good this team is, how strong this season was, how great this season was. The song that was getting sung, it's in the aftermath of yesterday's game. Champions of England. We know who we are. We're champions. And they'll never take that away from us.
No, it's true. But yeah, what I was basically going to say is, ultimately, this was a great season. That is definitely a better adjective. But like we talk about in games sometimes, it's still, there's room for improvement. There's still something to point to, like, as what we strive for next season. Like, it's easy to get complacent when you're at the top, but there's still plenty more that we want to do as a club that this squad hasn't done, that we're still going to be able to reach for. And I'm looking forward to doing it all over again next season.
Yeah.